and hello. I'm delighted to be sharing some of my research and thinking at one of this year's World Industrial Design Day events with the topic of Let's Get Ethical. My presentation is titled More Than Human Trust and urges you to consider the ethics of designing beyond ourselves with the lens that is my area of focus, trust factors in design practice. My name is Dr. Zene Krige and I am sharing from New Zealand, and I am currently a senior tutor at Massey University School of Design, Toiraforangi. I am a practicing industrial designer and researcher specializing in the integration of trust in design practice, and I have had the pleasure of working across a broad range of projects with a primary focus on healthcare and agriculture. After my bachelor's degree in industrial design, I worked alongside a group of engineers to design robots, which led me to Plantech Research Institute, where I initiated my PhD study while learning the value of science and data communication as a tool to inform design practice and outcomes. I managed to complete a creative practice-based PhD through the School of Design at Massey University in 2024. Focusing on how factors of trust can be incorporated into designed objects for the horticultural sector. Within healthcare, I use design as a bridge between frontline workers and innovative interventions, through insight-led design approaches that understand lived experience and respond with informed empathy. Interestingly, I found that the trust elements I tested in agriculture was very relevant to healthcare, and believe it to be valid to most areas for which we design. I believe this is because taking on a lens that generally tries to consider environments, whether they be natural or human-built, and technologies, whether they be tangible or artificial, is the least we can do as designers when creating experiences and objects for the current world. So part of my research on trust is looking at what breaks, builds, and repairs trust. Ethical behaviors and principles are key in building trustworthy relationships. To put it in a social context, we assume the morals of others to do the right thing, and are generally encouraged to uphold these values ourselves. Clifford Nass, author of the Computers as Social Actors paradigm, suggests that we approach computers with the same social lens, and then appraise our behaviors towards it if it acts inappropriately. You cannot generally consider trust without considering distrust. If trust is the house, then ethics may well be the front door. Ethics and trust are intrinsically linked and reliant on one another. I am sure that other presentations as part of this series will explore and provide definitions of ethics in a multitude of ways, so I hope to build on these through the context of its relationship to trust. The definition of trust that I will be using is that of Lee and C., who define trust as the attitude that an agent will help achieve an individual's goals in a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. As in all relationships, trust is a crucial component and requires continuous management. So, to outline the way in which trust typically presents itself, we have intrinsic values and aspirations as individuals, impacted by external factors such as work and expectations of others. We are offered options, at which point we need to use methods of appraisal to make the decision. This is followed by the decision to adopt a specific means. When we then begin to use products, we often are, or at least should be, calibrating our reliance on it based on a number of factors, including its performance and communication. Incorrectly done, this can lead to mistrust, distrust, or a miscalibration of trust. What we are aiming for is that trust can be managed, allowing for ongoing use. So, to accept a new technology is not to adopt a new technology. Research in this area shows a great deal of variation in definitions, and the two terms are often used interchangeably. The best definitions I could find to illustrate the difference are that of Diaz et al. And B.H. Hall. And so, in essence, the intention to use versus the actual use are different, and they should be measured as such. One of the main factors that can break down trust, in technology in particular, is hype. Both Gartner's cycle of hype and G.A. Moore's diffusion theory speaks to the chasm where many technologies fall off. Many products may overpromise and underdeliver, making it more challenging for new solutions to validate themselves. This makes people more skeptical when interacting with new technological products and needs an understanding of trust to mitigate. So, a decision has been made to accept a product and its embedded technology. Now, we have to rely on the management of trust to allow for ongoing reliance and use, often the crux of what we try to achieve as industrial designers. There are a number of things that can happen at this point. The miscalibration of expectations leads to disappointment, and this is often through things like hype playing a role in misaligning the expectations that a user has on the product. Mistrust can refer to when an over or under reliance takes place in the product. This is often where the words human error get used as part of figuring out where to assign blame. When trust is managed, which is an ongoing process within all relationships, it can make for meaningful, ongoing interaction. Distrust is when the relationship has broken down to the point where repair strategies are needed to recover the relationship. Distrust can come from frustrations with product performance, unreliable communication, and broken expectations. When we need to repair trust, it is similar to how we may look to repair trust between two people. Actions such as apologizing, admitting fault, and clarifying intentions. By proving repeated reliance after the trust has been broken, it can slowly begin to rebuild trust. If a system is able to identify faults and offer support in fixing it, this should help the user. Sometimes, trust is lost on a longer term and it is deeply rooted. Examples being that with some companies who overpromise and people invest and business booms faster than they have capability to fulfill, and then as a consequence the business crumbles. Distrust in institutions can be seated in a range of factors, including historical instances of bias or societal pressures. It's important to be aware of these and to design accordingly. So within trust literature, the key themes surrounding trust are familiarity and personality, followed by predictability, transparency, and explainability. And then this reflects in reliability and functionality. In essence, the areas outlined by Mayer et al. Of purpose, process, and performance. So let's put this in the context of a project, and this is where my research into trust all began. In August 2021, I initiated a project with Plantech Research Institute here in New Zealand, who were interested in better understanding how design can benefit their technological development and communication of innovations. This project operated in the overlap of design and technology to benefit the primary sectors. My work sat beside a multidisciplinary team of engineers and scientists, from whom I gained a lot of understanding about the current state of technological capability and that which is emerging. The scope that was focused was on a New Zealand-based solution and considered the measurement of fruit, particularly its sizing. So, what we found was both an ergonomic challenge, including that it's a very repetitive process, and you're measuring potentially manually multiple fruit over a weekly basis because we're measuring change over time. There's a lot of inaccuracy when we're measuring it manually because we're trying to find the widest part of the fruit. You might also be like the person on the right hand side who is measuring it incorrectly because we want to measure the width, not the height. And then also because we have different percentile height humans measuring, there's also a lot of variation as apples grow, because we mainly worked with apples, they grow at different rates throughout the tree. And so we were getting a whole range of different data, and this was creating a lot of distrust. The other thing is, when we're manually touching a lot of different fruit, we are spreading disease, and this is not a very useful way to go about things. But at the same time, growers needed this data to make informed decisions. And so I went about trying to use technology to solve the problem, but also wanting this to operate alongside the environment and users in an ethical manner. So there are over 7,500 species of apple in the world, and each market across the globe has a unique preference, which means that growers need to be proactive and responsive to changing demands. There is a shift from volume to value, where designer species of apples are favoured and how they are grown is seen as almost a trade secret. To enable these shifts, we need to know as much as possible about our orchard at a given time, hence, real or near real-time sensing. Gathering this data can be a costly task, and growers know how valuable this data is, so they want to protect it from competitors. The reluctance to share data then in turn makes it really hard to train data sets. So, from this springs two lines of inquiry. How can we design trust into products and systems that are used in the horticultural industry, and how can we communicate the right data effectively? Fruit growing is a cyclical process based on the seasons, and with the primary window of time for fruit growing being between October and February here in New Zealand. The primary source of data that many orchard managers rely on is the pack-out report. This only comes from the pack house once the crop has been processed, and often creates tension as they feel shortchanged, and it is often also too late to make changes for the following season. This was a key moment of interpersonal distrust that launched this wider research project. Empowering orchard workers with their own data with which to make decisions on operations will enable this point of distrust to be better mitigated. Those who work in the orchard environment are typically from nearby islands such as the Cook Islands, Tonga and Samoa, or are Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand. In Te Ao Maori, that is the holistic worldview of Maori, Te Ao is the concept of the natural world and our interconnectedness with it. There is reciprocity and guardianship rather than ownership. This reciprocity enables trust between humans and nature. Where the double bind exists is that we are in many ways retroactively needing to employ these world perspectives into our existing systems. Large-scale methods such as the use of satellite or airborne platforms have the critical limitation that hail netting can distort or hinder data collection. Climate change means that hail netting is increasingly used as a means of protecting crops. Thus, looking at an approach which operates below the hail netting line is crucial. This project sought to create a solution that mitigated the interpersonal trust, better informed users to make the right decisions for the environment that they are harvesting from. One of the things I also identified was that the intelligence of technology-embedded devices matter. People often vastly overestimate the capability of technology to be free thinking when utilizing machine learning, or the very overused and underexplained blanket of artificial intelligence. Our understanding of objects often seem to encompass the visual appearance of it, so as soon as there's cameras involved, it was also an assumption of character building because there were two cameras, and this created a whole line of inquiry around anthropomorphism also. So in this complex ecosystem of agents, why does it matter to consider more than human perspectives when we design? We want to incorporate sustainability for the environment, equitable use of technologies, and the discernment of their systems while minimizing bias. We have machines working as part of a network with one another and ourselves, and we as humans have interpersonal interactions. Through undertaking reviews of the literature around trust, I identified that there was no relevant framework which could assist me in marrying all of these agents in regards to trust. So, I sought to create one, and this ended up being the novel contribution of my doctoral thesis. When we look at the agents involved in my example project, we have us, the human, interacting with a product, whether that be an object or interface. We have the technology used to enable our use of the product, and our interactions and understanding of this may differ from the product. And then we have the environment in which this product will exist, in which we will need to ergonomically be able to use it, and in which the technology needs to be able to be incorporated, all resulting in a centralized experience. Therefore, what if it isn't the human-centered design as such, but experience-centered design, which considers the agents beyond ourselves for whom we also design? I was interested to visualize how trust interacts with these agents and what the relevant frameworks and considerations are when considering these specific relationships. Firstly, Clifford Nass, the author of Computers as Social Actors Paradigm, explores the social means by which we approach technologically embedded objects such as computers, and suggests that this is usually done in the same way that we approach other humans, unless it is proven we should do otherwise. The key words of integrity, ability, and benevolence were discussed by Lee and C in 2004. Building on this, Mayer et al. And Hoffenbachir in 2015 discuss human automation trust and outline the key elements as purpose, process, and performance. Tarini et al. Bring up the FEES framework, which may be used as a bridge between technologies and their intended environments. Factors including fairness, explainability, auditability, and safety as being key. Langton et al. Discuss system-like trust as the link typically experienced between technologies and our shared experiences thereof. This area includes the theme of reliability, functionality, and helpfulness. And then, seeing the framework in full, we can understand that a functional design criteria is required to understand how the product needs to operate within this environment, while also having themes of how we might implement sustainable practice, trust calibration, the action and experience that is being involved, and also our cognition of this. So, as part of this project, I had to identify, develop, and measure the importance of trust factors for the design of a technology embedded product to different stakeholders throughout local Apple production, as well as consultants, designers, and data specialists. Using a Likert chart, stakeholders were able to indicate how strongly they felt over the relevance of each factor, the hypothesis being that there may be distinct differences between different roles and stakeholders based on their interest. The design for trust criteria that comes as a result of this was generated through a range of participants who weighted the importance of each factor, represented here on radar charts. What was interesting was that rather than a specific factor being most important, the overarching themes were the personality of the participant as introverted versus extroverted, and their level of openness to accepting new technologies. This correlates with a number of authors within this area. So, what are some of these key factors that I was testing? Familiarity refers to how well we know or comprehend that which we are assessing for trustworthiness. It is the same as meeting a new person for the first time, versus knowing them for a while. Eventually, you know what to expect. We have all experienced the moment when a device randomly powers down or takes you to a page you didn't want to be on. The ability for a product to communicate its function and its intention is very important in helping to ensure that the user can remain in control and understand what has or is going to happen and why. The predictability of a product is crucial in an environment where safety, time efficiency, and accuracy are at the core of its product function. The product should be able to firstly explain why it is operating in this manner, and then be transparent in its operations and data to allow for faults to be identifiable. The perceived utility of a product is vital when we decide whether or not this product is the best option for purchase to meet our wants or needs. We have an expectation of performance as intended, and the expectation levels of users may differ based on factors including the product range and price range and previous experience with a similar product. We want to know that the product we purchase is going to serve us well, hopefully even for a long time. Reliability can be used to refer to the physical nature of the product as well as to the system on which it operates. Reliability also extends to the ecosystem around the product, to reflect on the product's makers and whether or not they can be appraised as being reliable source from which to purchase the product and to support the user if something goes wrong. The overall competence of a product depends on the nature of a product. You may not want a potato peeler to be intuitive, beyond its basic intelligence. However, when a technology-embedded object such as a robot is being discussed, the overall perceived competence and expectations to undertake the task for you is higher. The expression of social etiquette in intelligent products may be difficult to visualize until you imagine the opposite, a rude product. It is not until you consider what a rude product might act like that you realize that affordances embedded into intelligent products are often set in a very specific tone. We are surrounded by digital products which we don't notice until we look for them because they are a given part of our daily lives. Cultural differences also will factor into this. The embodiment of personality into products is evident in design all around us, and a method which we might use to make products more familiar, relatable, and sociable. In products, personality can be imbued deliberately to further heighten the sense of connection and collaboration that we also have with these products. So, if trust is broken and the product is deemed to be unreliable, it is very unlikely to see continued use, and often continued use is one of our primary goals. So these are just some of the initial factors that I used as part of my study, and you might find that you can create a tailored set of these and incorporate them as part of your own design criteria for your own projects. So, in essence, my recommendations for designing for trust and the promotion of technology adoption are the following. The first is to manage expectations and deliverables, to map benefits and features of that which you create, be it a product, system, or service, as it needs to be able to explain itself. The following point is to design for transparent and explainable actions, visualizing insights in a way that allows for comprehension. The third is having clear intentions to ensure the user understands what is expected of them or the context, and working with users for users, often communicating in a familiar way through form language and so forth. But also understanding that we want to design for the environment, we want to design for the technology, and having a frank discussion with stakeholders about this lens that we're trying to implement. The fourth is clear communication. Remove barriers of jargon and the red tape of colloquial language. I have found that the use of metaphors acts as a great shared method to explain systems, faults, or ideas. If it already exists, we have some idea of how it might work and its proportions, and that means that we can better assess its application to the context of that which we are working on. The fifth point is to align interests for all parties involved. This is often done by a critical understanding and engaging with the context. We need to acknowledge alternative options that could be opted for and ensure that what we produce is fulfilling the need of the user in a way which is novel and clear so that their decision-making process is streamlined for them. We also want to design for sustainability in a way that is tangible, that is practical, and that is incorporated into our workflow as a given, not as an accessory. So ethics and trust are intrinsically linked and reliant on one another. I urge you to continue to explore keywords in this area that this presentation just only wanted to briefly touch on, and to further consider how we might incorporate this way of seeing into our creative practice. Thank you for your time, and to the World Design Organization for this great privilege. If you have any thoughts and would like to get in touch, I really welcome that. Happy World Industrial Design Day.